I've witnessed many political controversies come and go over the years, but the recent clash between Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and former President Donald Trump was something truly profound. It revealed something deeply unsettling about the state of our nation, and it left even one of the most outspoken progressive voices in Congress visibly shaken. It all started with the passing of Charlie Kirk, the young activist who built Turning Point USA into a powerful organization. Regardless of one's political leanings, there's a basic decency expected when someone dies, especially a husband and father. But Ilhan Omar saw things differently. Within hours of Kirk's death, she was reposting content that compared him to Dr. Frankenstein, suggesting that his own creation had turned against him. This wasn't just poor timing or a momentary lapse in judgment. Omar doubled down, calling Kirk's legacy something that belonged in the dustbin of history. She spoke about the hate she claimed he had spread, painting him as a villain whose death was almost poetic justice. For many Americans, particularly those who remember when public discourse had certain boundaries, this felt like a line that should never have been crossed. It wasn't just another political dust-up that would be forgotten by the next news cycle. This was a moment that revealed something profound about the deep divisions and lack of civility that have taken root in our society. And then, Donald Trump responded in a way that left even Ilhan Omar herself rattled. The president's words and actions sent shockwaves through the country, further exacerbating the tensions and highlighting the growing divide between those who believe in upholding the basic decency and respect that should govern our public discourse, and those who seem willing to abandon those principles in pursuit of political gain or ideological dominance. As I reflect on this incident, I can't help but feel a deep sense of concern for the future of our nation. The clash between Omar and Trump was not just a political disagreement. It was a manifestation of a much larger struggle for the soul of America. And the outcome of this struggle will have profound implications for the direction of our country and the values we choose to uphold as a society. I have always been fascinated by the complex interplay of politics, morality, and human nature. When I witnessed the recent controversy surrounding Ilhan Omar, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of unease. It's not just about Republicans and Democrats trading barbs. There's something much more fundamental at stake here. What struck me most was the bipartisan nature of the reaction. Across the political spectrum, people were questioning whether Omar had gone too far. Democrats were quietly expressing discomfort with her timing and tone, while independents wondered what had happened to basic respect for the deceased. And yes, the Republicans were calling for everything from censure to investigation. But this wasn't just another Twitter fight. When Trump entered the fray, he raised the stakes dramatically. Trump, ever the opportunist, saw exactly what Omar had handed him. Here was someone who had positioned herself as morally superior, yet was displaying what many perceived as a shocking lack of compassion. Trump's response wasn't just a tweet or an offhand comment. It was a strategic political counterpunch that would leave Omar scrambling for months to come. On Truth Social, Trump laid out what he saw as the fundamental contradiction in Omar's position. He pointed to her home country of Somalia, describing it as a place plagued by governmental chaos, widespread poverty, ongoing conflict, and systemic corruption. 70% of Somalia's population, Trump noted, lives in extreme poverty. The country consistently ranks among the world's most corrupt nations, struggling with everything from bribery to embezzlement to basic governmental dysfunction. But Trump didn't stop there. He posed a question that cut right to the heart of American frustration with certain political figures. How does someone from a country facing such enormous challenges position herself as an authority on how America should be run? It was a classic Trump move, taking the moral high ground away from his opponent by reframing the entire conversation. Then came the part that really got Omar's attention. Trump brought up what had been whispered about in certain circles for years, questions about her marriage history and whether she had married a family member to help with immigration status. Wasn't she the one that married her brother in order to gain citizenship? Trump wrote, stirring up a controversy that had long been simmering beneath the surface. As I reflect on this unfolding drama, I can't help but wonder what it says about the state of our political discourse. When basic human decency becomes a partisan issue, it's a sign that the ground is shifting beneath our feet. And when a figure like Trump can so effectively reframe the conversation and challenge the moral high ground of his opponent, it speaks to the complex and often unpredictable nature of modern politics. I've been closely following the unfolding political drama surrounding Ilhan Omar and her recent comments. It's clear to me that this situation represents a significant shift in the mainstream political discourse. Trump's response has been nothing short of a game changer, and the implications are profound. The crux of the matter lies in the way Trump has framed this issue around national identity and loyalty. By raising questions about Omar's background and credibility, he has effectively flipped the script. Instead of defending his own actions, Trump has put Omar on the defensive, forcing her to address the legitimacy of her own position as an American citizen. And this is where things have become truly fascinating. Omar, who has built her political brand on being unafraid to speak truth to power, has suddenly found herself in a vulnerable position. Her appearance on CNN with Caitlin Collins was a masterclass in how not to handle a political crisis. Rather than exuding the calm confidence of someone secure in their stance, Omar appeared agitated, defensive, and desperate to change the subject. When Collins pressed her about the Frankenstein comparison she had shared, Omar's response revealed a deeper unease. Her attempts to deflect and claim that she didn't have to agree with every word in the content she amplified fell flat, as the Frankenstein metaphor was the central focus of the material she had chosen to share. What's more, Omar's insistence that she couldn't be deported because she was an American citizen only served to further undermine her position. The nervous energy with which she delivered this statement suggested a lack of confidence, and when Collins pushed back, Omar became even more defensive, at one point suggesting that the people calling for her deportation were simply ignorant of basic civics. But here's the crux of the matter. This was never really about the technical legal question of whether Omar could be deported. This was about something much more powerful in American political discourse. Trump's response has tapped into a deep well of sentiment, and the reverberations of this moment will be felt for a long time to come. I've been closely following the unfolding political drama surrounding Ilhan Omar and her recent controversial comments. As someone who has a deep respect for the democratic process and the importance of civil discourse, I can't help but feel a sense of concern over the direction this situation has taken. It's clear that Omar's remarks about consigning Charlie Kirk's legacy to the dustbin of history struck a raw nerve, particularly at a time when emotions were running high and his family was grieving. While I understand the desire to position oneself on the right side of history, the timing and tone of her comments came across as insensitive and even callous. What's fascinating to me is how this incident has become a focal point for much broader frustrations and tensions within the political landscape. The massive turnout at Kirk's memorial service, with estimates suggesting upwards of 100,000 people in attendance, was a powerful display of the deep respect and admiration he had earned from his supporters. In the face of such an outpouring of grief and community, Omar's words seemed to ring hollow and out of touch. But the problem for Omar isn't just Trump's response or the public backlash. It's the fact that even her own allies in the media and within the Democratic Party have started to distance themselves from her comments. When you lose the support of your own side, that's a clear sign that you've stepped into uncharted territory. I can't help but wonder what this all means for Omar's political future. Will she be able to weather this storm and emerge stronger, or will this be a turning point that ultimately leads to her downfall? It's a fascinating question, and one that I'll be watching closely in the weeks and months ahead. Regardless of one's political leanings, I think there's a broader lesson here about the importance of empathy, nuance, and understanding in our public discourse. When we fail to consider the human impact of our words and actions, we risk alienating not just our opponents, but even our own supporters. It's a cautionary tale that I hope all politicians, regardless of their ideological affiliation, will take to heart. I've been closely following the unfolding situation surrounding Ilhan Omar's controversial comments, and I must say, the public reaction has been both fascinating and concerning. It's clear that her Frankenstein analogy struck a nerve with many Americans, even those who may not necessarily align with her political views. The sheer volume of criticism on social media is a testament to the depth of feeling on this issue. What's particularly interesting is how this has transcended the usual partisan divides. Even those who typically support Omar have found themselves struggling to defend her timing and tone. There's a strong cultural expectation in this country that we show respect for the deceased and their families, regardless of our political differences. Omar's apparent disregard for this norm has resonated far beyond the usual political battlegrounds. What's more, this incident has played into existing narratives about Omar's character and loyalties. For years, critics have accused her of prioritizing political point scoring over basic human decency. Her comments about Kirk have only served to reinforce those suspicions for many Americans who had been willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. The security situation at Kirk's memorial has added another layer of complexity to this story. The arrest of an armed individual impersonating law enforcement has highlighted the very real consequences of inflammatory political rhetoric. This is no longer just about hurt feelings or political point scoring. It's about public safety and the responsibilities that come with holding public office. As I've watched this unfold, I can't help but feel a sense of unease. When even sympathetic media outlets start to distance themselves from Omar's position, it's a clear sign that the political landscape has shifted. She now finds herself in the uncomfortable position of trying to defend the indefensible while simultaneously claiming to be the victim of unfair criticism. This kind of defensive posture is political poison, as it makes her look both callous and whiny. I can't help but wonder what the long-term implications of this incident will be. Will it further erode public trust in our political institutions? Will it embolden those who seek to exploit divisions for their own gain? These are the kinds of questions that keep me up at night as I contemplate the potential consequences of this unfolding situation. The tragic events that unfolded at the State Farm Stadium, where Kirk's memorial was being held, sent shockwaves through an already tense situation. This was no mere online outburst. A heavily armed individual had managed to infiltrate the venue where the president and vice president were scheduled to speak. Amidst the gathering of tens of thousands of grieving Americans, law enforcement had been monitoring intelligence about potential threats to the memorial service for days. Yet the fact that someone could get so close while claiming to be conducting private security sweeps raised serious concerns about the climate created by inflammatory rhetoric. When politicians dehumanize their opponents and suggest that certain legacies deserve to be forgotten, it can embolden individuals to take those messages to dangerous extremes. This incident forced a conversation that Congresswoman Omar was likely unprepared to have, one that delved into the connection between divisive language and public safety. The memorial service required security measures akin to a major sporting event, with roadblocks, fencing, and hundreds of law enforcement officers, all because the political climate had become so toxic that even honoring the dead could not happen without significant security concerns. But the implications went beyond just political fallout. This incident sparked a national security conversation that opened up discussions about a legal reality that many Americans did not fully understand: the process of denaturalization. Most citizens assume that once they become naturalized, their status is permanent and unrevocable. However, the law is quite specific about the conditions under which naturalized citizens can lose their citizenship, such as providing false information during the naturalization process or committing serious crimes. This teaching moment allowed millions of Americans to grapple with the nuances of citizenship and deportation, a topic that President Trump had brought to the forefront with his controversial statements. The incident also highlighted the growing divide within the Republican Party, as some members condemned the president's rhetoric while others rallied behind him. This split threatened to further polarize the political landscape, making it increasingly difficult to find common ground and work towards meaningful solutions. As the nation grappled with the aftermath of the memorial service, it became clear that the path forward would require a renewed commitment to civil discourse, empathy, and a willingness to listen to diverse perspectives. Moreover, the event sparked a broader conversation about the role of social media and its impact on political discourse. The rapid spread of misinformation and the amplification of extreme views on these platforms had contributed to the toxic environment that led to this incident. This realization prompted calls for greater regulation and accountability within the tech industry, as well as a renewed focus on media literacy and critical thinking among the general public. I've been closely following the developments surrounding Ilhan Omar's recent controversies, and I must say the implications are quite profound. The legal discussions around potential denaturalization proceedings, while not automatic, do carry significant weight, particularly when it comes to allegations of fraud or other serious offenses. What's truly fascinating is how this issue has gained such traction in the political discourse. It wasn't just Trump's comments that brought it to the forefront. There had been persistent questions about Omar's immigration history for years. Allegations of marrying a family member to facilitate immigration status, if proven true, could indeed trigger denaturalization proceedings. These weren't new accusations, but rather claims that had been circulating among journalists and investigators, yet had never fully broken into the mainstream political arena. Trump's actions, in essence, forced this conversation into the open, making it impossible for Omar or the media to continue treating these questions as mere fringe conspiracy theories. Whether the allegations are true or false, the mere fact that they are being discussed at the highest levels of American politics has placed Omar in an incredibly precarious position. This is no longer just political theater. It's a genuine concern about her long-term political survival. The defensive reactions from Omar suggest an understanding that this is not just another passing political attack. This has the potential to be career-ending if the wrong information comes to light or if public opinion turns decisively against her. The political isolation within her own party has become increasingly apparent as the controversy drags on. Democratic colleagues, who might normally rush to defend a fellow party member, have been notably quiet, offering only tepid statements about moving on and focusing on policy, with very few willing to explicitly defend Omar's comments or her handling of the subsequent fallout. This kind of political abandonment is devastating for any politician, but it's particularly damaging for someone like Omar. When your own party starts treating you like a liability rather than an asset, when they start distancing themselves from your positions and your rhetoric, it signals that your political capital is nearly exhausted. Behind the scenes, there are whispers about potential primary challenges and donors becoming reluctant to support her. The implications of this controversy extend far beyond the immediate political landscape, as it raises broader questions about the integrity of the naturalization process and the vetting of elected officials. If the allegations against Omar prove to be true, it could have far-reaching consequences for the public's trust in the system and the legitimacy of those in positions of power. The implications of this situation are truly profound, and I believe the American public deserves to understand the gravity of what's unfolding. I've always been fascinated by the complex dynamics at play in the political landscape, particularly when it comes to the intersection of identity, ideology, and power. The case of Ilhan Omar is a prime example of how these forces can collide in unexpected and often divisive ways. As I observe the unfolding events, I can't help but feel a sense of both concern and intrigue. On one hand, I recognize the importance of giving voice to diverse perspectives and challenging the status quo. Omar's background as a Somali refugee who has risen to the halls of Congress is a testament to the promise of American opportunity and inclusion. Her willingness to question traditional institutions and advocate for progressive policies resonates with many who seek a more equitable and just society. However, I also understand the apprehension and unease that her actions have generated, particularly among more moderate and conservative elements. Her criticism of American foreign policy, her support for movements like BDS against Israel, and her frequent references to systemic racism and oppression have made her a lightning rod for controversy. There is a perception that she represents the danger of divided loyalties, the risk of importing foreign conflicts into American politics, and the threat to traditional American values posed by rapid demographic and cultural change. This clash of visions for America's future has become a symbolic battleground, with Omar emerging as a symbol of multicultural progressivism. The intensity of the reactions, both from her supporters and detractors, speaks to the deeper currents of anxiety and uncertainty that are shaping our political discourse. As I navigate this complex landscape, I find myself grappling with the nuances and complexities of the situation. I recognize the valid concerns raised by both sides, and I believe that finding common ground and fostering constructive dialogue is crucial. At the same time, I remain committed to the principles of free speech, democratic debate, and the ongoing evolution of American identity. Ultimately, the story of Ilhan Omar and the broader tensions it represents is a reflection of the profound changes and challenges facing our nation. The rise of polarization, the erosion of trust in institutions, and the struggle to reconcile competing visions of America's future all contribute to the charged atmosphere surrounding this issue. As a society, we must find a way to navigate these turbulent waters with wisdom, empathy, and a commitment to the democratic ideals that have sustained us through times of great change and upheaval. It is a testament to the power of identity politics, the fragility of consensus, and the enduring struggle to define the very essence of what it means to be American. I have a unique perspective on the recent events surrounding Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and President Trump's response. As someone who has navigated the complexities of American politics and culture, I can offer a nuanced understanding of the deeper implications at play. In my view, this clash represents a symbolic battle over the very soul of America. Trump has positioned himself as the champion of a particular brand of populist nationalism, the belief that America's leaders should prioritize American interests above all else, that immigration should serve our national needs rather than global humanitarian concerns, and that our traditional values are worth preserving and defending. This resonates strongly with a demographic that lived through the Cold War, when questions of loyalty and patriotism were matters of national survival, not just political talking points. For many senior Americans, Omar's willingness to criticize America's flaws and focus on its historical failures rather than its achievements feels like a rejection of the national narrative they grew up believing in. When Trump frames his response around loyalty and belonging, he is tapping into these deeper anxieties about whether the new generation of leaders truly shares the values and commitments that previous generations took for granted. This goes beyond just one congresswoman's comments. It's about the very direction of American culture and politics. The consequences for Omar are already becoming clear, and they're not pretty. The likelihood of formal censure by the House has increased significantly, and while largely symbolic, it represents a permanent record of congressional disapproval. For someone trying to build a national political profile, this kind of baggage can be crippling. The long-term damage to her credibility may be the most serious consequence of all. As I reflect on this situation, I can't help but wonder what the future holds. Will this clash serve as a catalyst for a deeper reckoning with the changing face of American identity and leadership, or will it simply deepen the partisan divides that have come to define our political landscape? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain: the stakes have never been higher. The ongoing debate over the role of identity politics in American politics is not limited to this specific incident. It is a broader reflection of the shifting demographics and cultural values within the country. The rise of social media and the increasing polarization of political discourse have amplified these tensions, making it more difficult to find common ground and reach consensus. Moreover, the Trump administration's hardline stance on immigration and its efforts to reshape the federal judiciary have further exacerbated these divisions. The appointment of conservative judges, who may be more inclined to interpret the Constitution through a narrow originalist lens, could have far-reaching implications for the protection of civil rights and the recognition of diverse perspectives. At the same time, the growing influence of progressive voices, such as Ilhan Omar and her fellow members of the Squad, has challenged the traditional power structures and forced a reckoning with the country's complex history. This has led to a backlash from those who feel that their way of life is under threat, further fueling the polarization. As we navigate these turbulent waters, it is crucial that we strive for a more nuanced understanding of the issues at hand. Rather than resorting to simplistic narratives or partisan rhetoric, we must engage in thoughtful, evidence-based dialogue that acknowledges the legitimate concerns and perspectives of all stakeholders. Only then can we hope to find a path forward that preserves the core values of American democracy while adapting to the changing realities of the 21st century. I've given this a lot of thought, and I believe that the situation with Ilhan Omar is far more complex and nuanced than it may initially appear. While her comments were certainly controversial and drew significant backlash, I don't think it's accurate to say that her political career is doomed or that Trump's response was an unqualified success. The reality is that politics is a messy and often unpredictable arena where public perception can shift rapidly and in unexpected ways. Omar's opponents may try to use this incident against her, but she has shown herself to be a resilient and savvy political operator who is unlikely to go down without a fight. At the same time, I think Trump's response, while strategically sound in some ways, also carries significant risks. By positioning himself as the defender of American values, he may have scored points with his base, but he also risks further alienating the broader electorate and reinforcing perceptions of him as a divisive and intolerant figure. Ultimately, I believe that the true test will be how both Omar and Trump navigate the fallout from this incident in the weeks and months ahead. It's entirely possible that this could end up being a defining moment for both of them, but the outcome is far from certain. Only time will tell how the political landscape shifts and which side emerges stronger. I've been closely following the ongoing controversy surrounding Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and the response from President Trump. As someone who has a deep respect for the principles of free speech and democratic representation, I believe this situation reflects some profound challenges facing our nation. On one hand, Omar undoubtedly has the constitutional right to voice her criticisms of American policies and institutions. As an elected official, she has a responsibility to speak up on behalf of her constituents and to hold our government accountable. At the same time, her comments have struck a nerve with many Americans who feel that her rhetoric crosses the line into disloyalty and disrespect. The question of what we owe to our country is a complex and deeply personal one. While we must always protect the right to dissent and engage in robust public discourse, there is also an expectation that our elected leaders will uphold the values of national unity and civic responsibility. When someone in a position of public trust makes statements that are perceived as inflammatory or divisive, it can have real-world consequences, as we've seen with the security threats directed at Omar. Ultimately, I believe this controversy highlights the growing polarization and toxicity in our political landscape. As social media amplifies every controversial statement, politicians may feel compelled to make increasingly outrageous claims in order to capture attention and energize their base. This dangerous cycle threatens to further erode public trust and undermine the foundations of our democracy. Looking ahead, I'm deeply concerned about the potential for this rhetoric to escalate in the lead-up to the 2020 elections. If the temperature continues to rise, we may see a race to the bottom where politicians compete to make the most provocative and divisive statements, regardless of the consequences. This is a troubling prospect, and it's one that I believe all Americans, regardless of their political affiliation, should be deeply concerned about. I have witnessed a profound shift in the political landscape, one that demands our utmost attention and concern. The recent events surrounding Ilhan Omar's comments and President Trump's response have exposed a troubling trend that threatens the very foundations of our democratic discourse. As I reflect on this situation, I am struck by the fragility of trust in our leadership. When our elected officials fail to maintain even the most basic standards of civility and decency, it suggests a breakdown in the values that have long underpinned American politics. The stakes could not be higher, for when our leaders cannot show elementary human compassion, even in the face of tragedy, it speaks volumes about the state of our political culture. Yet, this controversy also presents a unique opportunity. It serves as a clarifying moment, one that lays bare the true character of our representatives. When politicians reveal their true selves under pressure, we are afforded a rare glimpse into their judgment, their priorities, and their fundamental understanding of the values that should guide our nation. In the case of Ilhan Omar and President Trump, the contrast could not be more stark. Omar's reaction to the death of a political rival and her defensive posturing in the face of criticism suggested a troubling disconnect from the basic tenets of American decency and respect. In contrast, Trump's response resonated with millions of Americans who were appalled by Omar's behavior, positioning him as the defender of common values. This is a watershed moment, a warning and an opportunity. If we, the American people, do not demand better from our leaders, if we do not hold them accountable for upholding the most fundamental standards of human dignity, then our political discourse will continue to deteriorate. But the choice is ours. By paying close attention to the character and conduct of our elected officials, we can shape the future of our democracy, ensuring that the values of civility, compassion, and respect remain the bedrock upon which our political system is built. I've been closely following the ongoing saga surrounding Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and President Trump's response. As someone who has a deep respect for the democratic process and the principles of free speech, I believe this situation raises some profound questions about the nature of political discourse in our country. On the one hand, I can certainly understand the outrage that many Americans feel towards some of Omar's past statements, which have been perceived by some as anti-Semitic or insensitive. As an elected official, she has a responsibility to choose her words carefully and to uphold the values of tolerance and inclusion that are so central to our national identity. When she fails to do so, it's understandable that her constituents and the broader public would demand accountability. At the same time, I'm deeply concerned by the tone and tenor of President Trump's response. Rather than seeking to de-escalate the situation and bring people together, he has chosen to inflame tensions and stoke the flames of division. His call for Omar to be sent back to her country of origin is not only factually incorrect, she is a naturalized American citizen, but it also plays into a dangerous and xenophobic narrative that has no place in a healthy democracy. What troubles me most, however, is the broader implication that political leaders can simply dismiss or discredit their opponents by questioning their loyalty or patriotism. This is a tactic that has been used throughout history to silence dissent and consolidate power, and it is antithetical to the principles of free speech and open debate that are the lifeblood of a functioning democracy. The ongoing feud between President Trump and Congresswoman Omar has also highlighted the deep partisan divisions that have come to define American politics in recent years. Rather than seeking common ground and working towards solutions to the pressing issues facing our nation, our elected officials have increasingly resorted to inflammatory rhetoric and personal attacks. This has not only eroded public trust in our institutions, but it has also made it increasingly difficult to find the bipartisan cooperation necessary to address the complex challenges we face as a country. In this charged political climate, it is more important than ever for citizens to remain engaged and to hold their leaders accountable. We must demand that our elected officials uphold the highest standards of ethical conduct and that they prioritize the interests of the American people over partisan agendas. Only by doing so can we hope to restore the civility and respect that are essential to the health of our democracy. Ultimately, I believe that the choices we make about the kind of leaders we're willing to accept will have profound consequences for the future of our country. Do we want leaders who are more interested in scoring political points than in serving their constituents with dignity and respect? Or do we want leaders who are willing to engage in substantive, good faith dialogue, even with those with whom they may disagree? These are not easy questions, and I don't pretend to have all the answers. But I do know that the stakes are high, and that the decisions we make in the coming months and years will shape the kind of country we leave for future generations. I encourage all Americans to stay engaged, to think critically about the issues, and to make their voices heard at the ballot box. The current political climate has become increasingly polarized, with both sides often resorting to personal attacks and demonization of their opponents. This has led to a breakdown in civil discourse and a growing sense of mistrust and division within our society. It's important that we find a way to bridge these divides and work together to address the real challenges facing our country, such as economic inequality, healthcare, education, and climate change. One potential solution is to focus on electing leaders who are willing to put country over party and who have a track record of working across the aisle to find common ground. These leaders would need to be willing to listen to different perspectives, to engage in respectful debate, and to prioritize the needs of their constituents over their own political ambitions. Additionally, we need to encourage greater civic engagement and political participation at the local and state levels. By getting involved in our communities and holding our elected officials accountable, we can help to shape the direction of our country and ensure that our values and priorities are reflected in the decisions made by our leaders. Ultimately, the future of our country depends on the choices we make today. It's up to all of us to be informed, engaged, and committed to the democratic process so that we can build a better, more just, and more prosperous future for ourselves and for generations to come.